Welcome to the channel, That Retired Guy. My name is Daryl, and yes, I'm retired, and actually if you're interested, my preferred pronoun is Guy. So you can call me That Retired Guy. Now I've been retired for quite a while. I'm one of those Freedom 55 guys. The thing is, you'd actually have to be pretty old to really know what I'm talking about. All of us old folks will remember the advertising slogan back in the 80s, Freedom 55. The idea was you retire early and spend your days on a tropical beach somewhere drinking margaritas. Well, that retired guy, he pulled it off. Well, not so much the drinking margaritas on the beach part, but retiring at 55. So yeah, I've been retired nearly 15 years now and loving it. Now, but as far as life choices go, Freedom 55 doesn't even compare to the choice I made back in 1972. That's when my sweetie and I got married. Yeah, we were probably too young and foolish, but we love each other even more today than we did back in those days. Marrying this girl, that was the smartest thing I ever did. Now, I'm not saying it's always been clear sailing. I mean, if you put two strong-willed people together, there's going to be stormy times, but after 50 years, we've become one powerful team. I mean, we've weathered many storms, and it just made us stronger. So the irony was not missed on us when, as we were celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary this past weekend, we also experienced the biggest storm to hit eastern Canada in over 50 years. And not your regular kind of storm either. It was a Derecho. Now, I wonder if they named it after my brother Derek. I mean, you know, my whole family is kind of a stormy bunch. I don't know. Anyway, oh yeah, and in case you're wondering, no, I don't have another brother Daryl.
Hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. That's my other brother Daryl.
Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, the Derecho. Now, this was no ordinary tornado or hurricane. It was like a combination of the two. It was a storm that stretched 1,000 kilometers from Michigan to Maine. It went across Ontario and Quebec. I mean, there were tornadoes and hurricane-force winds all along the path. Here in Ottawa, we saw 120 kilometer-an-hour winds. Now, all this happened in the middle of our anniversary dinner, but I get ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it all went down. Now, in the beginning, if you can imagine, a 50th wedding anniversary, it doesn't happen all the time, so a certain amount of planning went into this event. And we had a collection of family members make the trip to Ottawa, and menus and wine lists were all well coordinated. I got to be honest, my sweetie is the genius when it comes to that kind of thing, and without all the preparing, it might have been a disaster. You see, the storm hit mid-afternoon on the day of the dinner party. Now, we had just come back from a wine tasting at a local vineyard, a winery called Vignoble Clos de Vully. Yeah, it's very French out here, but as it turns out, the owners are Swiss Francophone. Now, I'd like to give a big shout out to their Etter wines. It's great cold climate varietals. Of course, that's fancy wine talk for grapes that grow here in the frozen north. Now, this winery tour, that was my idea. It was my way of making up for the Tulip Festival tour the day before. It turns out that because of the early spring this year, all the tulips were wilted and brown and mostly dead. It was more like a tour of an abandoned graveyard. Anyway, the wine tour was actually a bit of a last-minute thing, so sort of like a Hail Mary pass. You see, my planning is not as good as my sweetie. She had already prepared most of the night's dinner before we even left that morning. And there were two huge prime rib roasts in the sous vide, slow cook all day, and homemade baked Alaska was cooling in the freezer, just waiting to be torched. The hors d'oeuvres were lined up, and wines were chilling before we left for the wine tasting. Now, let me take just a quick sidetrack here for a second. I want to comment on this whole sous vide thing. Now, we got introduced to this a few years ago, and we'll never go back to oven roasting. You see, slow cooking at a low temperature in a water bath, that means you end up with meat cooked perfectly all the way through and just the way you like it. And because you don't sort of heat stress the meat, it's kind of cut with the fork tender. Also, you got to try it with a pork tenderloin. They come out moist and tender. Just can't be done in an oven. Oh yeah, and don't go spend your fortune buying yourself a big pot or a specialty container. Just use a plastic file box like I did from the office supply store. Cut a corner out of the lid and Bob's your uncle. Anyway, back to the story. So while we were away sampling the wine and learning about grapes that can handle the winters better than me, of course, the hors d'oeuvres, the dinner, the dessert, they're waiting for us back at home. We got back just as the large raindrops are starting to fall. So what happened next could only be described as a raging tempest. I mean, it came as a surging windstorm with torrential downpours. The wind was blowing so hard the rain was going sideways, and we watched in amazement as the trees out in the backyard, well, they bent nearly to the ground and branches were flying all around. The wind hadn't even been blowing more than 30 seconds before the power went out, and even though it's still daylight, it was like nighttime because of all the dark storm clouds. Eventually, the rain subsided and the wind died down, but it wasn't long before the sun was setting, and we had to finish our cocktail party by flashlight. Now, not just any flashlight. This is my trusty Ryobi work light, to be exact. Actually, it was kind of romantic, but probably would have been better with candles instead of work lights. But whatever. Okay, so now the question is, how are we going to cook dinner? I mean, we got no power. We need to cook the potatoes, the vegetables. Still have to sear the roast. You have to finish a sous vide roast with searing it on a barbecue. You need to burn the outside just a little bit. Okay, it's even better if your barbecue actually catches fire, and well, that's a whole story for another day. So here we are with a 50th anniversary dinner to cook and no power. Well, if you've been following that retired guy, you'll know that this power outage, it's not my first rodeo. There's another idiom. Anyway, have a look at my last video titled The Great Blackout of 2021. And as they say, been there, done that. So what are we going to do about this power outage? Well, it turns out there are a lot more reliable forms of energy than electricity. We got propane. So here's a big shout out to the Canadian oil and gas industry. Not only did you support my family all those years with a paycheck and a great career, but you're about to save my 50th wedding anniversary. Cheers to you. So now we fire up the barbecue and my brother-in-law dons his chef hat, and with the help of the Ryobi work light, dinner is flame broiled and ready to serve. The prime rib was excellent, and after we were done with caramelizing the baked Alaska, again with a propane torch, dessert was served. The party went on well into the dark night, and if you really want to know, it was a 3-battery party. Actually, it was one of the finest dinner parties I can remember, and celebrating our 50th anniversary with loving family in the middle of a Derecho, that's a memory that's going to last forever. Sometime that evening, after everyone was fast asleep, the power came back on, and by noon the next day, the family had said their goodbyes and were on their road home. With the party behind us and dishwasher full, I thought I'd take a break from all the excitement and go for a ride on my motorcycle. For me, it's a great way to relax, and I love to cruise through the countryside, especially this time of year because the lilacs are in bloom and, the smell of spring. So it was quite a surprise when I got down the street and started seeing all these trees knocked down and power lines all over the road. We had very little damage in our building, and some shingles of the roof were off, a couple of trees down in the backyard. It was nothing major. But the farther I drove into the countryside, the more devastation I saw, like hydro poles snapped in half, lines lined up all along the road, lying in the farmers' fields. There were houses with their roofs torn off, pieces of house spread for miles across the field. There were barns knocked down, whole sections ripped off. The number of trees blocking the road was scary. I mean, somehow we missed all this. We stood sipping wine, watching the trees rock back and forth in the backyard. Now, the Weather Channel says that the Derecho raged over nearly half of Canada's population. 41 million people were affected. There were 10 people died. 900,000 people were in the dark. Now, thankfully, we only suffered a power outage, and we were back online that night. Many are still without power a week later. And my granddaughter's school still without power, going on 8-9 days now. I guess we should thank our lucky stars that we were spared. I think my lucky star is the North Star, mostly because that's the only one I can find. So not only did we ride out the Derecho, we did it in style. Prime rib, baked Alaska. I think this was just nature's nod to a couple who have weathered many storms in life and came out the other side even stronger and more in love than ever. Love you, sweetie. So here's to you, Derecho. May your winds blow strong and free, so our roots grow long and deep, like those mighty trees left standing. And for all you out there, remember, even when those winds are blowing strong, be sure to live your best life.